Hi there, Kate Bora and Fiona Pearman. And for this week's live, we're talking about what individuals, leaders, and organisations can do to counter the merit myth. And we want to start with the opportunity for all of us to upgrade the merit conversation. So don't let the conversation stay vague. Meet the word merit, meet discussions around merit with curiosity and vigour. When someone potentially says, we're a merit-based organisation or the decision was based purely on merit, ask questions. Seek to get some specifics, observable data to support the conclusion or the decision. What assumptions were made, who has had access to the opportunities, who was considered for the promotion and/or the succession list or the high potential list, and what biases challenge ourselves and each other to think about what biases or defaults might be operating here. I think naming the elephant in the room that merit is not neutral and it's often shaped by context, by power and historically masculine leadership norms. And again, having that conversation, not to be right, but to be curious and to challenge that default thinking. And really shifting the conversation from personality and style and fit to what was actually achieved and contributed to that has led to the merit-based outcome.
I think secondly, we want to make allyship real, especially for leaders and especially for men in the organisation. We want this real ownership of responsibility for allies and leaders to be informed about the merit myth, to understand the ways in which this plays out, and to actively intervene when they see that bias at work. We want to challenge those vague judgments. We want to push back on comments like, oh, not leadership material, not ready, not enough charisma, not their style. Really dig in when we're talking about style rather than performance. What do we actually mean here and what are we looking for as an organisation? And there's an important piece here about redirecting evidence. We want to focus back on outcomes, contribution, and results, not that personality piece. And this means intentionally addressing some of the known biases, in particular, this propensity to see one group in terms of their potential and other groups only through their achievements.
Number three is about resourcing women or underrepresented groups to be more visible and to demonstrate, make their contributions really visible to key decision makers. We want to encourage them to advocate for themselves, and really shifting their mindset that working hard, knowing your stuff won't just pay off, won't just be noticed, that actually they do need to get out there, advocate for themselves, make sure that their skill, capability, contributions are seen by the organisation and by the decision makers in that organisation. And we want to close that opportunity gap. Capability only becomes merit if it's seen, sponsored, and given room to operate. So, to our piece earlier around allyship, being able to look for opportunities that can allow women and underrepresented groups to be able to be considered for something to demonstrate outcomes, to demonstrate that contribution that may equal merit in the current system that merit's operating in.
Fourthly, we really encourage organisations and leaders to build systems that don't rely just on those good intentions. We want to get into the detail. We want to move beyond being vague and actually interrogate the current systems and patterns. Where are we potentially favouring one group? Who consistently gets those opportunities, those stretch roles, the exposure, and the sponsorship? What does that do to who looks as though they have achieved merit? We want to be really precise about definitions. What explicitly do you mean by the word merit, by successful contribution, and surface any biases that are potentially hiding inside those assumptions? And then, of course, we want to broaden what we look at here, what counts. When we expand merit beyond technical competence or a particular personality style, and we start to include some of the other aspects, integrity, following through, having great judgment and discernment, being really powerful at collaboration, demonstrating resilience and follow through, how are results actually achieved, not just what is achieved.
And that's a really good segue into this piece number 5 around making progression and advancement transparent, measured, and accountable. I'd say this, based on our experience, is not something we do well in many organizations at all. But, using data, particularly around progression, and WG's been great for many organizations in, forcing them to get systems that support them to be able to do this, to track who is progressing, on what basis. So we've got good data around who is progressing. Perhaps we haven't got good qualitative data. For what reasons have they been promoted? At what pace? How quickly have they been promoted? And so I think there is an opportunity to go deeper beyond that sort of pure quantitative data, to go into some of the explanations and some of the rationales around the experience of promotion. I think there's an opportunity to be surprised. I think a lot of people are, when they start to get below the surface level of some of these progression data sets. I think it's also really important, and again, not something we do well, is to clarify pathways in organizations. And this isn't necessarily an easy thing to do. In fact, there's not a lot of organizations that have clear career pathways that are transparent, visible, that someone in an organization can look to and be able to then make some good decisions and create a good development plan for themselves. That is not something that exists and operates in many organizations. And there are ways with which we can do this, right? There are ways with which we can have conversations with people in our teams to talk about promotion opportunities, to talk about what would need to be present in order for them to be considered for that promotion. And of course, then more broadly, when we're advertising roles internally, that in general, though, is kind of reactive piece rather than supporting really structured pipeline development and progression pathways for an individual perspective as well. I think finally, don't confuse visibility with value. We must actively manage sponsorship and exposure and not assume performance alone will be noticed. We hear so many stories of plenty of women in our world, and we know it's not just women, but that's kind of where our world, the sorts of clients we're working with all the time, day in, day out, who will talk about, I'm working really hard, I'm doing great work, and other colleagues, often male, have been promoted above me, and feeling quite frustrated because from their perspective, looking at it objectively, they are a stronger candidate. They have delivered more value for the organisation, and they feel quite justly that they should have been promoted. And so we do need to look for, potentially some of those quieter achievers, and look at how we can elevate those.
And I think finally, we really want to develop leaders who have the capability to think systemically. And this is really important because when we can take a multitude of perspectives, when we're able to lift ourselves out of the detail, out of the day-to-day, and actually start to understand the influences that are driving systemic patterns, that are driving embedded behaviors, when we question those and we expose them, we're likely to see things that weren't apparent before. And this means that leaders need to be really supported and resourced to have skills around their ability to recognize bias, to have the self-awareness and the self-questioning to look at what's going on and potentially how am I contributing to the lack of merit in our organization? What's going on from a power perspective? What are some of the embedded structures where we prioritize certain individuals over others? There are so many ways we can better understand that when we're equipped to think about this in much deeper layers than simply what we see on the surface. We want leaders who are capable of challenging some of the stereotypes we default to. We often hear examples of loud, charismatic, the guy who tells the great joke, who lands the one-liners, all of that sort of thing. They're often seen as fun and powerful and effective. And yet we also know that quiet, understated, empathetic, and relational leadership can be just, if not more powerful. And often it's more sustainable and it's more encouraging of the values and the purpose of the organization overall. So when we don't have a one size fits all leadership model and we include more diversity, that's when we're really getting to a point of an organization that can truly represent and celebrate and promote merit.
It takes intentional work, commitment, and follow through to truly establish a merit-based organisation. If we're going to hold this standard in an organisation, then today's conversation and some of our earlier conversations that talked about the level of initiatives that need to be present for a pure merit system to operate in an organisation, then many of us, individuals, leaders, and organisations, have work to do. We're going to leave it there. If you've enjoyed today's confidence conversation, we'd love to hear from you. If you know someone in your world who'd benefit or be interested in the conversation, of course, we'd love for you to share this on. If you'd like to find out more about our work, head over to our YouTube channel. Hundreds of videos over there on lots of different really fun and interesting, complex topics that we've done over the last couple of years, but certainly some great ones on power and politics last year as well. And if you'd like to find out more about our work, head over to our website, coreconfidence.com.au. Thanks for tuning in today. Don't forget to hit subscribe on your YouTube channel for more insights on confidence, leadership, and complex work environments. We drop new videos regularly and we'd love to share them with you.